Bolivians remember the Guayani Sacaba massacre of November 15th on the 6-month mark. President Nicolás Maduro says that small new groups of mercenaries are forming in Colombia. I don't have text. No tengo texto. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefanía Bravo in Quito, Ecuador. This is from the South. The president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, has denounced the training of mercenaries in Colombian territory who plan to attack the Bolivarian homeland.
Así lo denuncio. New mercenary groups are being formed in Colombia. We have the information, their names, last names, where they are located, who is protecting them, and everything points to Ivan Duque again. I am reporting this today, on May 14, so that later the Colombian press and oligarchy can claim we didn't report this. We are warning them in time. New assassins, terrorists, mercenaries have gone together in Colombia.
Venezuela's communications minister Jorge Rodriguez has held a meeting with various government officials and experts to analyze the recent foiled mercenary incursion. The participants analyzed the legal, political, and military elements of the contract signed by opposition lawmaker Juan Guaidó, which established plans for the invasion of Venezuela, as well as the assassination of President Nicolás Maduro and other top officials. Participants also discussed the evidence gathered so far that points to the involvement of the Venezuelan far right, the United States, Colombia, and drug trafficking organizations.
That's the big triangle of this crime we're gonna figure out today. One side of the triangle is the extreme right wing in Venezuela. Another side of the triangle is the Trump administration and his lucky ally personified by Colombia President Ivan Duque. And the third side of the triangle is drug trafficking organizations.
Venezuelan writer and lawyer Luis Brito Garcia has detailed specific aspects of the contract signed between opposition figure Juan Guaidó and U.S. mercenary Jordan Goudreau for a terrorist incursion of Venezuela, calling the document illegal.
About this document, we can highlight at first that this contract is illegal. One cannot legally contract someone else for a murder or an assassination. If the contract is broken, no judge can force a signee to comply with the contract and demand that a person be killed. Also, a contract to be paid in US dollars has no legality in Venezuela, unless there is a clause that establishes possible payment in national currency. Besides this, it also lacks of any form of ideological, social, cultural motivation. The only objective of this document is the murder of Venezuelans.
Meanwhile, National Constituent Assembly member Cilia Flores warned that the contract authorized by terrorists to attack citizens in addition to state institutions.
They didn't only set off the aggressions, but with this contract, they left they could illegally use forces, even little forces, against any perceived threats. It even says here in the document that they can shoot at people who represent a threat. The service provider, the mercenaries who were initiating the attack, were going to be allowed to use little force.
For her part, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez said that this contract delivered Venezuela's sovereignty to the United States.
They wanted to start a war in Venezuela, a war fought by a third party, but this has deep connections to the U.S. government. The other serious issue is Juan Guaidó's use for U.S. jurisdiction in the contract. The document said it is subject to the laws of the state of Florida. Why the state of Florida? Because under international law, and particularly under our own laws, the objective of the contract is illegal. But under the laws of Florida, the death penalty is permitted. Therefore, they made sure they will have the impunity by placing the contract under these particular laws.
Meanwhile, Venezuela's Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez announced the recent arrest near the Venezuelan-Colombian border linked to the failed Operation Gideon.
We have captured 39 deserters of the Bolivarian National Armed Forces trying to enter to Colombia, we have to assume they also came to fulfill a job as part of a general scheme, a maritime invasion, another one by land, with the aim of surrounding and committing all the atrocities they were going to commit. All this has to be very clear from a military point of view. It is a planned operation, prepared and financed from abroad, and they were already divided because the mercenaries are driven by money, because they do not have a cause that unites them.
Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez added that the enemy is underestimating the foundations of Venezuela's military power, which has first promoted the late commander Hugo Chavez and strengthened by President Nicolás Maduro.
Constitutional President Nicolás Maduro, Chief Commander of the Armed Forces, restarted with great strength our Bolivarian militia, which is not only strong in numbers, with 4 million members, but is highly organized. It is divided in defense units. There is a form or line of defense that the enemy underestimates. They do not know us or our organization. They also unaware of the disgust that this contact has caused within our ranks.
Bolivians are remembering the day 6 months ago when 9 people were killed by security forces during the Sacaba massacre as they demonstrated in rejection of the coup. More in this report by my colleague Camila Escalante.
It's been 6 months since the November 15th massacre in Sacaba, the first massacre committed by the coup regime. On that day, citizens arrived in a peaceful demonstration to Sacaba, demanding the return of the government of Evo Morales and rejecting the coup which had just taken place. Nine people were killed. Many people turned up injured at hospitals in Sacaba and in the city of Cochabamba with serious injuries. The numerous testimonies received by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights are consistent in indicating that the protesters were unarmed. They were advancing peacefully on their own initiative and were suddenly assaulted with firearms, tear gas containers, batons, and other weapons. Police helicopters participated in the operation as witnessed by the Cochabamba police commander himself before the commission. Quote, in the commission's opinion, these events can be characterized as massacres, given the number of people who have lost their lives in the same way, place, and time, and because they were committed against a specific group of people. In addition, the patterns of injuries that have been recorded offer serious indications of extrajudicial execution practices. Residents took me to the sites of several killings by the military and police, including the roads, which remained blocked where the massacre took place.
Castellano puedes, compañero. Aquí primero la entrada, aquí ha traspasado. Y uno ha pasado por aquí raspando.
I was there November 25th as relatives of the massacred in Sacaba presented the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights experts with bullets upon their very brief visit as evidence of the massacre. Media and human rights groups have done little in the way of documenting this evidence.
They were killed like animals, like some dogs. All of them were killed by bullet wounds. We want justice.
I'm also seeking justice for my husband. He was killed here by bullet wound. They had come to defend democracy.
Those peaceful protesters executed by regime security forces for calling for the restoration of Bolivian democracy are regarded as martyrs. Camila Escalante, Telesur in Quito.
More stories coming up, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. The former director of the United States Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority has warned that the government of President Donald Trump has no master plan to battle the global pandemic. Dr. Rick Bright slammed the Trump administration's response to COVID-19, telling Congress that without a clear planning and an improved coordinated response, 2020 could be the darkest winter in decades for the U.S. The career civil servant has said he was removed from his post due to the political exposure after he expressed opposition to the Trump administration's promotion of unproven drug therapies to fight COVID-19.
Our window of opportunity is closing. If we fail to improve our response now, based on science, I fear the pandemic will get worse and be prolonged. There will be likely a resurgence of COVID-19 this fall. It'll be greatly compounded by the challenges of seasonal influenza. Without better planning, 2020 could be the darkest winter in modern history.
In the United States, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has urged caution as the state prepares to reopen in stages. New York is one of the most affected states in the nation, with about 23,000 cases and 2,022 deaths to date.
Do not underestimate this virus. It has beaten us at every turn, and it has surprised us at every turn. Don't take it lightly. Don't underestimate it. I believe the facts will change as we go forward. The more we learn about the virus, the more the facts change, and the worse it gets. There has been. I suggest caution, again, because this virus has only gotten worse the more we know. But there's no law or regulation that tells you how to interact with your personal relationships. That's up to you. I hope you do it smartly, but that's up to you.
Armed protests are ongoing in the U.S. state of Michigan against stay-at-home orders and in the face of alarming COVID-19 figures. The protesters gathered outside the closed Michigan State Capitol building, demanding the easing of quarantine measures imposed to halt the spread of the novel coronavirus. So far, the state of Michigan has recorded more than 48,000 cases and 4,714 deaths. Leaders of the G20 Forum held their second virtual meeting this year to discuss advances in relief policies for the debt of developing nations during the unprecedented crisis affecting economies worldwide.
Their decision to put moratorium on developing nations' debt repayment was very well received by governments, international organizations, the media, civil society groups, and the market. The monetary and fiscal policies that our countries have swiftly put in place have proven to be critical for supporting our economies to weather the crisis and emerge from it as strong as possible.
Puerto Rico's governor has unveiled a plan to spend more than $2.2 billion in U.S. aid to fight the coronavirus crisis. Governor Wanda Vázquez said about $300 million will be used in part to increase testing, expand contact tracing, and help the unemployed. But officials acknowledge there are tens of thousands of people still waiting for benefits announced shortly after a lockdown imposed in mid-March.
There are three foundations to assign the $2.2 billion. First, on health, government, and economy. Regarding health, we are going to focus on testing, tracing, isolation, and treatment as the four main areas.
The Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis has announced the dissolution of Parliament, a move he said was retroactive and had taken effect on Tuesday. The National Assembly would have automatically prorogued this Thursday, the 5-year anniversary since its first sitting. In an address to the nation on Wednesday night, the Prime Minister said elections would be held in 90 days, though an official date was not announced.
The next election will bring certainty to our federation, preserve our democracy, and allow us to continue to deliver a brighter future, creating employment and prosperity, building bigger homes, and keeping us safe. Let us stay together and see this through. In this election, you will have a clear choice. You can go forward to a safer and brighter future with team unity, or backwards to the past, which you rejected in 2015.
St. Lucia has once again announced the full recovery of all coronavirus positive patients. 18 people had contracted the viral respiratory illness on the island, and as prevention measures began to ease, the chief medical officer is reminding the public that this is not a license to be reckless.
Although we are pleased to maintain a low transmission level of COVID-19 in country, we remind the public that we are still at risk and must remain vigilant as the threat continues. As we progress with the phased reopening, we must ensure that all protocols are adhered to. We recognize the efforts of a wide cross-section of the population in adopting the recommended infection prevention and control measures and taking the necessary precautions when having to venture out in public. We would like to see these measures adopted at the community level as well.
Mauritius has become the second country in Africa to be declared virus-free. The island nation's official COVID-19 page said as of Monday, 322 people have recovered out of the 332 confirmed cases. The remaining 10 have died. May 11th also marked the 15th consecutive day that no new cases has been reported in the country. A lockdown remains in place to halt the possible spread of the virus. Weeks ago, Mauritania declared itself virus-free with 6 people recuperating and 1 fatality. Another infection was subsequently recorded. Burundi has ordered the expulsion of the World Health Organization's expert team backing the country's response to the coronavirus pandemic just days before a presidential election. No reason has been given for the decision, but according to diplomatic sources, Burundi's foreign ministry aborted a similar attempt to expel the same 4 officials a month ago.
We are in communication with the government of Burundi to clarify and understand the reasoning behind this decision they have taken. And we are in the meantime then working with the UN system in the country to organize the departure of our staff.
The Cuban medical mission sent to South Africa to help the fight against COVID-19 has completed the mandatory quarantine and are now ready to be deployed in different provinces. The team of more than 200 Cuban doctors arrived in South Africa last month to bolster local healthcare workers in their efforts to halt the spread of the coronavirus. The group was immediately quarantined in Pretoria in line with the standard protocol for those entering the country. On Thursday, the Cuban medical team sent a message thanking South Africans for their warm welcome they have received since arriving in the country. We're taking one last break, but stay with us. Welcome back. Palestinians in Nablus burned an image of U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to protest against the so-called Middle East peace plan and the green light given to Israel to annex key parts of the occupied West Bank. Pompeo visited Israel on Wednesday, a day before its new government was to be sworn in, to discuss plans to annex much of the occupied West Bank into the Jewish state. The decision has also stoked tensions with Jordan, which is one of the only 2 Arab states to have a peace deal with Israel and shares the strategic border region, accounting for roughly 30% of the West Bank.
The conspiracy is dangerous. The conspiracy is strong. The situation is bad. Wherever it is the U.S., the Arabic silence, the urge for Arab normalization with Israel, the dispute between Palestinians, the conditions are bad, but the right of the return will not fall. Wherever there were 7 million and 1 million of them Palestinian refused these plans, we can form a military militia of 7,000 fighters, and they can blow up the situation. There will be no security, no safety, no peace without the right of return.
Israeli citizens took to the streets to protest as the long-awaited swearing-in of the coalition government was postponed. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu requested ex-army chief Benny Gantz to postpone the swearing-in until Sunday, leading to demonstrations outside the Knesset in Jerusalem. Citizens have awaited more than 500 days for the government's formation and gone through 3 inconclusive elections in less than a year. The protesters also said that the government has not addressed the COVID-19 crisis. Syria's Ministry of Health announced on Thursday the repatriation of 2,270 citizens stranded abroad due to restrictive measures imposed to fight COVID-19. These citizens returned on 13 Syrian Airlines flights from 9 different countries. On Thursday alone, 249 citizens arrived to Damascus International Airport from Iraq. Syrian officials have specified that from February 5th to May 14th, the Arab nation isolated 6,781 people in quarantine centers, and out of those, 4,224 have recovered, while 2,555 are still under medical care. China has started testing people for the COVID-19 in the city of Wuhan after a cluster of new cases was discovered a few days ago. The Chinese government plans to test the entire 11 million population to prevent the recurrence of cases. A few weeks after, the city has lifted measures put in place to prevent the spread of the virus. Wuhan was the first city to be affected by the virus and accounted for majorities of the fatalities in China before the government managed to contain the pandemic. China has slammed the United States over accusations that Chinese hackers were attempting to steal research on developing a vaccine against the coronavirus. The spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry also said the Trump administration should, quote, focus on their own prevention and control work after Trump described COVID-19 as the plague from China.
China expresses strong dissatisfaction and firm opposition to such a smear by the U.S. side. Judging from past records, the U.S. has carried out the largest cyber theft operations worldwide. China has made significant strategic achievements in its fight against the COVID-19 epidemic. China is also leading the world in COVID-19 vaccine research and treatment. Therefore, China has more reasons to worry about cyber espionage. Epidemic diseases know no borders or race. They are common challenges for mankind, and they are an unpredictable eventuality. If U.S. politicians really put the safety and health of the American people first, they should immediately stop blaming and discrediting other countries, and focus on their own prevention and control work, as well as promote international cooperation against the epidemic. This is the only correct path to take.
The Japanese government has lifted a state of emergency imposed due to the coronavirus for the majority of the country, but kept it in place for top cities like Tokyo and Osaka. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has also announced that a second emergency budget will be allocated in addition to the $1.1 trillion worth of emergency funds.
As of today, the government will lift the state of emergency in 39 prefectures before it is due to expire at the end of the month. By lifting the state of emergency in many areas, we're going to develop a new lifestyle, which is the lifestyle of the world to live with coronavirus. Today is the start of it.
The Prime Minister of France has announced an €18 billion rescue plan for its tourism sector to weather the coronavirus crisis. Edouard Philippe also announced that people will be allowed to go on holidays in July and August.
S'agissant des vacances.
Regarding holidays, and again, this will be subject to the evolution of the epidemic and possible localized restrictions depending on its evolution. We are working on a reasonable scenario. French citizens will be able to go on holiday in France in July and August. France means metropolitan France and its overseas territories.
The Russian government has announced an emergency handout of 23.4 billion rubles or $360 million for airlines struggling because of the coronavirus pandemic. President Vladimir Putin had already disclosed the amount of the planned handout from Russia's reserve fund, but the publication of a government decree allows airlines to apply for funding. Russia's Civil Aviation Agency said flagship airline Aeroflot had already applied for the funding. The government said Russian airlines can spend the money to cover outgoings, including salaries and the cost of leasing planes. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And be sure to follow us on social media as well. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and of course on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Stefania Bravo. Until next time.